Hi, and welcome everyone to Whole Soul School and Foundation's Fireside Chats for May 2021. I'm Marie Mohler, and I'm an author, intuitive life coach, and a host of this Fireside Chats podcast series. I am here with Lacy Frazer, my co-host, who is a clinical psychologist by training and a practicing life coach and consciousness educator today. And I want to welcome our listeners. And here at Whole Soul School and Foundation, it's important that we all remember together that our mission is to increase self-awareness, personal empowerment, conscious communication, transformation, and freedom in people worldwide through our Good Vibes broadcasting and consciousness teachings. We hold a core belief that conscious conversations are the education, and we are excited to spotlight our new merchandise at bonfire.com, where every purchase not only inspires you in your journey to live your best life, but it also helps us to make these positive messages and this positive impact available to our growing audience, raising awareness and funds at the same time. We currently have two great designs, our logo and motto, which is the conversation is the education here at Whole Soul School and Foundation. And we also have our logo and the motto for Good Vibes Broadcasting, which is real stories, real vibes, real people rising. So please check out our apparel there and have fun shopping to support our mission and the work we do here. We deeply appreciate your support, and you can find out more about that merchandise in the links below this video. So without further ado, I just want to welcome everybody. I want to welcome you, Lacy. I want to thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely.
And today we are going to talk more about the call to adventure. And if you are listening to this podcast, you may be feeling this call yourself. And we wanted to illustrate and discuss more of the details of the rising hero's journey so it feels more accessible, right? And applicable in people's lives. So it feels more aligned, I think, in people's lives. And so that it feels actually, Lacy, more choosable. That people can see that it is more accessible through the choices they make every day. And before we get started, I wanted to share a poem about the call to adventure that I've also included in our newsletter, and it also posted on social media. It's a poem by John Mark Green. And let's just take a moment and all take a breath together for a second. Because when we access inspiration through the arts, it really speaks to a deeper level inside us, right? We relax from kind of our mental minds and we open the energy of our hearts. And this poem by John Mark Green. Set fire to all your maps. Forget how it's always been. We're explorers of the heart, learning to dream again. The adventure of a lifetime with love alone as our guide. Exotic places beyond imagination, ones we've longed for deep inside. And this is, to me, also the magic of writing, Lacy, and poetry and the arts that opens up the understandings we have at deeper soul level, the places inside us that know all about this hero's journey and that can reawaken inside us when we give ourselves permission to have these little doses of artistic and literary inspiration. And I know we're going to delve into some deeper things today, and I want to invite you now to invite us into this deeper conversation about this call to adventure, just to dig a little deeper into that and talk about what is it and what ways we might today in our conversation illustrate a deeper understanding of the call to adventure.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's wonderful to be here with you again, Marie, for our once a month journey together. And, I'm going to reiterate the fact that we here at Whole Soul School and Foundation are all about helping and guiding people to find hope and healing through understanding their life as a grand adventure. It's an adventure to be experienced and ultimately to be learned from. Okay, there have been many philosophers and psychologists and spiritual teachers throughout the ages that have described the journey of personal transformation as a journey, an unfoldment, with distinct stages where we experience things, we learn from them, and then we eventually teach them to other people. We teach what we've learned, we bring it back and we share it.
Yes.
Right? And that's the crux of the hero's journey. The hero's journey is a common story structure. We talked a lot about this last month. It's a story structure shared by cultures worldwide in which a character ventures into unknown territory to retrieve something they need. Facing conflict and adversity, the hero ultimately triumphs before returning home transformed, right? And of course, we've referenced the work of Joseph Campbell, who in 1949 came up with the hero's journey structure, which essentially had 3 main stages and 17 substages, right? And we talked a lot last month. We laid out the hero's journey, each stage of the hero's journey. So what I want to do today is I want to just briefly review the overarching 3 stages.
Yes.
And then we're going to step into actually stage 2, the call to adventure, in our discussion today.
Perfect.
Okay?
Perfect.
So as we talked about a bit last month, there are 3 main stages to the hero's journey. The first is the departure act or stage, where the hero decides he or she needs to leave what's called the ordinary world, right? The world they've been living in, the routines they've been living with, the natural environment, whether it's the environment they're in or the life they're living, it's their comfort zone, essentially, right?
Yes.
And something catalyzes a need to move away, move outside that ordinary world, and it's scary, okay? The initiation act refers to, basically, it's when the hero ventures into unknown territory, quote unquote. Joseph Campbell calls it the special world, and is birthed into a true champion through various trials and tribulations and challenges. And the final sort of stage or act, the hero returns in triumph. The hero returns transformed and comes back to share with all those he knows and loves. Right? So that's kind of course, there are, as we talked about last month, there's 17 sub-stages, but these are the 3 main sort of elements of the hero's journey. So what we want to do this month is we want to really expand upon the second stage of the journey, which is called the call to adventure. So essentially the first stage is the ordinary world. It's the world, again, I just reiterate that, it's our life, it's the way we've been living, it's our routine, it's we do what we do, it's kind of our autopilot way of living.
I was going to say it's our default.
It's our default settings, exactly. Right. So the call to adventure is all about sort of booting the hero out of the comfort zone. Basically, our hero, aka you or I or anyone who's listening, right, is called out of their comfort zone. And it's through the confrontation involved with a problem or a challenge that they can't ignore. And they must make a choice about whether to undertake the adventure to potentially solve the problem or resolve the situation.
Right.
And the catalyst for this can take many forms, right? So the only question becomes, will the hero rise to the challenge? Will the hero step outside of the comfort zone despite the fear and move towards a solution or move forward into the unknown, really? Because it may start out with a feeling of, I need to resolve a problem, but often it's stepping out into the unknown and
a series of tests and tasks that await, that's going to grow them as a person and help them expand their lives and who they understand themselves to be.
Right.
And I think you were about to say, but I was just feeling what you were talking about. And so when the call to adventure comes into our life, when that invitation comes, and we're going to talk about that it comes in many different ways. But I was going to say, when people recognize that there's a call, some people who feel unprepared for whatever that invitation is will do their best to deny it, avoid it, somehow circumvent it so they never have to go on the journey.
Well, and in fact, one of the sub stages we talked about, I don't know if you remember, but last month was kind of the resistance to the call or denial of the call.
So, right. And even then, you're still in the call to adventure. You're having a conversation with it, whether you know you are or not.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. So,
right? Because we're all in the hero's journey somewhere. People a lot of times don't realize that. And some accept the call and some spend their time sort of trapped in the resistance stages to it.
Well, and you said something really important, that we're all in the hero's journey. What I really want to just emphasize again is that this is life. Life is the hero's journey, and for some of us, we want to stay in the safety of our ordinary world. It's just too scary to venture outside of the bounds of our ordinary world. So even if it's it could be something really small, like deciding you needed a new car, or deciding you wanted to buy a new house, something like that. I mean, we'll talk about what the call to adventure looks like in or potential ways it could look in your life. But I think what I want to just emphasize is that life is a continual unfoldment. Life is a continuous adventure. And we can choose how we're going to walk through that adventure.
Right.
And it's all about our perspective. It's all about how we view what happens in our life. We can we can move through life through the trials and tribulations and challenges, or we can see every challenge as an opportunity. But regardless, it is still an adventure. And we have to decide not just if we're going to answer the call, but how we're going to answer the call, right?
Exactly. How we want to participate in our life's journeys. And we're not raised most of us anyway, are not raised in our lives to understand that we're in a hero's journey. We're not often given this language. And so we don't understand that we have the power of perception. We have the power of perspective. And from the power of perception and perspective, we have the power of choice. So many people are living their hero's journey at a lower level and a lower level of sight, not seeing that they have so much choice. And that is trying to awaken this powerful creator, this powerful hero. So we are here in these podcasts to give some of this language back to people. Because once you start the process of remembering what you already know, you begin to remember who you already are. Who you truly are starts to come back if you just give yourself permission to go on the journey and learn a little bit more and reacquire some skills that might be rusty, right? You may have retired the sword and the knight, all the things that we might imagine any hero would take with them on a big quest. But we can go back and retrieve them. And that's what I think also these conversations are about. And we're here to illustrate some of the ways that this, in particular today, some of the ways that this call to adventure shows up in our life. And I do think it's very important for us to remember our perception, our perspective, and the power of choice as we review some of these things.
Well, the perception and perspective is critical because I find that many people live their life not viewing their life as any kind of adventure or journey. They're viewing their life as something that they tolerate or something that they are obligated to participate in at some level.
It's an endurance test.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And that anything that comes into their experience that is off-putting or unbalancing or challenging, right, is to be feared. Is to be shut down or denied. Right. But what?
Well, and I need to say something.
Yeah.
What you said is also, we have so much to say because we're all about the hero's journey. But it's interesting if you do give in to the voice of fear, right? As you're hearing this call, and if you feel called in that call to something more, to pull the covers tighter over your eyes, right? To secure the world that you've already been living in, that you want to fortify what you already have, and you go into that resistance space. Once you do that, you start riding the slippery slope of fear, right? And it's a very slippery kind of I'm feeling like chutes and ladders. It's a very slippery slope anyway. But if we can begin to pay more attention, see, the rising hero starts to listen for these invitations in their life, right? The rising hero knows that there is a journey and they're looking to get on it, right? And then you can also, as the invitations
rather
come,
than run from it.
Right. And then if you do feel an instinct to run from it, instead of feeling the fear and going down the slippery slope and going through all the choices and behaviors that would be avoidant or pushing it further away in some way,
or coping,
when you're actually listening and you know that the rising hero's journey is the journey for all of us, and that's when life gets a lot more fun. Even if it involves some challenges, we grow through challenges, right? Joy and bliss and everything being harmonious, it's fabulous. But the hero who's been around this story arc a few times knows to appreciate when you're in the joy and harmony and everything's wonderful. But you know what got you there. To appreciate at that level was a few challenges and a few tests through the contrasts of our lives. So
that's big. And here's the thing. If you don't choose to embrace it and step on the path in some kind of way, then you live a life in which you're a victim of life and a victim of the adventure.
Of the very same invitation.
Exactly.
The invitation can catapult you to be fabulous and awesome and exhilarating even. Or it can be the thing that, definitely calls you to live a life of smallness and resistance and irritation.
And suffering. Right.
Yes. Same invitation, different responses.
And different through the perspective, through your perception.
Correct.
Huge. So there are billions of people on the planet, which means billions of adventures going on all the time. And how are you going to view it? Right. Are you gonna show up and be a victim of it and live in fear, or are you gonna show up and cultivate and nurture the hero within you to walk through this adventure in an awesome way and learn and just simply continue to learn from it and teach others? So Marie, let's talk a little bit about some famous sort of heroes that answered their call to adventure, just to illustrate what it can look like. And certainly it's in all of our fairy tales. It's in most of our feature films.
Right.
So I want to give some examples and talk about them for a few minutes before we move into how the call shows up.
Sure.
Okay. So perhaps one of our famous examples is Luke Skywalker, right, in Star Wars. And really the call to adventure is when Luke is asked by Jedi Master Ben Kenobi to go with him to Alderaan to return the 2 droids to Princess Leia to help the rebellion defeat the Empire. Right?
That's a big invitation.
and I remember briefly, and I haven't seen the movie in a while, but I remember the energy of Luke when he lived on the planet with his
his uncle.
Yes, and he was his energy was he was complacent and he was bored. I remember that. He'd go and he'd sort of go out into the desert and fight imaginary foes with his lightsaber. But then Ben Kenobi came into his life and basically invited him
to a bigger purpose.
Exactly. And he, of course, chose, and of course it led to, 5 or 6 films, right? That was a big adventure.
Right. And that's true of all of us.
That's right.
I mean, there's that Luke Skywalker moment in all of us, and we often miss it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Another well-known film, The Terminator. Sarah Connor's told by soldier from the future Kyle Reese. He says, come with me if you want to live. Now, that's kind of like an ultimate invitation, isn't it?
It's daunting.
As they were being pursued by a cyborg assassin that wants to kill her unborn child. Okay, right. So, boy, do I accept that invitation? Come with me if you want to live. That was her call to adventure, right? And then, of course, another biggie is Neo in the movie The Matrix. Neo is asked by a computer hacker to take the blue pill or the red pill in order to either learn the truth about the world they live in or live in ignorance to the fact that the world is not what it seems. Right?
Right.
Of course, I have chills right now because that is so relevant in our world today. But I think with respect to this film and what we're talking about, that is the point in which Neo really has to decide. It's such a poignant moment, right, in the film when Samuel L. Jackson presents the red pill or the blue pill, and he's got to make a choice. And
the blue pill, I don't know if this is exactly in the film because I don't remember that moment super well right now, but it's almost like if he goes that path, which is to stay in his ordinary life,
yes,
he also will not remember the choice given to him. He won't remember any of it.
Right.
Right?
I think so,
And
yeah.
the red pill, though, is to go on a path that there's no guarantees, there's no certainties, there's, in fact, an abundance of both uncertainty,
right.
all of those things, and yet it's a path to expansion and adventure and excitement and growth and things that the soul inside us all craves.
Yes. I mean, that's perhaps one of the greatest examples there is, I think.
Yes, right?
Okay, and then there's the age-old favorite Ghostbusters, right? Where the Ghostbusters are called to investigate a supposed haunting at the New York Public Library, which leads to a threat that puts all of New York City in danger. Right. Okay, and that's their call to adventure. Their ordinary world is they're just hanging out, sitting in the fire station or doing whatever they're doing.
Not
right?
dealing with ghosts on a regular basis.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Yep. And then my last example is, of course, Frodo from Lord of the Rings, where he's asked by the Middle-earth wizard Gandalf to take a powerful ring out of the Shire to save all of Middle-earth. And he's got a big decision to make in agreeing to do that. So these are just a few. I know we could probably talk all day long about examples, but it shows you that this structure, this hero's journey sort of story arc, story structure is prevalent. It's the story of all of us.
Well, and I find it interesting. I don't think we had any plan to talk about this, but I feel like I've seen a podcast somewhere where George Lucas, the creator of the Star Wars series, actually knew Joseph Campbell. I think it was like a Joseph Campbell's, like some event was honoring him and his life's work. And I think George Lucas was there. And Hollywood is no stranger to the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell was seeding in our consciousness that has been around for centuries.
Right.
But, it really came into more and more people's consciousness because we can identify with those characters and they're always identifiable. There's personality characteristics that we can see ourselves in the film. And yet something else that often happens on the negative side of Hollywood and films is we think, well, I'm not that hero. Like that couldn't possibly be me.
Right.
Or that only happens in films.
Right.
And that doesn't happen in real life. And we are here to say, no, in fact, if we use the best of what films are, it's to illustrate that it is a universal journey. It's just happening very uniquely for that character, but you are a unique character in your own story. And we could all have a series of movies made of us, of the many forks in the road if we take the red pill and not the blue pill. And so I think that's important to also seed in people's awareness because I was surprised when I saw George Lucas had connected with Joseph Campbell.
Right.
And they don't advertise that, that I know of in Hollywood or the things that I've heard over the years. But they all know this is a universal journey. And when they brought this into the characters, I think a lot of the movies came even more to life in some ways for a lot of us on the big screen.
Yeah.
Because they were adding deeper, these just universal principles and these stages that people for centuries have journeyed. It's almost like a collective ancestral memory when Joseph Campbell brought this into a language that people could begin to share with each other. We started to acknowledge this isn't once and done. This one hero 500 years ago had this one quest, right? No, it's been going on for centuries inside all of us, and we tend to minimize that we're actually these grand heroes of our own journeys. And it's important to bring this into people's awareness that it's not just something that happens on the big screen in some well-paid actors, right? We are the ones having the quests. And if we would embrace it, there's so many amazing things that want to manifest for all of us.
You know, I think that is so well said, and I'm having sort of this epiphany live here on this call. Well, not really live, but live in this moment, right? That I have worked with other human beings as a psychologist, and most recently in the last several years as a coach, and for the last 30 years. And I think that one of the reasons that I never tire of working with other human beings is because I absolutely see and treat everyone who's sitting with me as a hero of their own life.
As a rising hero.
Yes.
That has summoned you in, perhaps even as the invitation to that call to adventure.
Yeah, right? Totally. And
and I just want to say, because I'm a witness to it, people can come to you because maybe they've had something shift in their marriage, or they have something with their health or their well-being, and they're not in the experience of that. And they might come in to talk to you about X, right? But it's never about X.
Never.
That's the ordinary world.
Right.
And the minute they're sitting in the chair across from you, right, whether it's in your classes or your sessions, all of a sudden they're on a journey and everything comes to life.
And life becomes exciting.
And life becomes exciting. And I think it's so important to recognize that, is that you see everyday heroes just beginning to enter the very starting point of their journey. But it isn't just that they just happen to stumble into you. That's the invitation.
Yes.
Is that they answered the call to go to this class. They answered the call to book a session. Do you know what I'm saying? Not everybody does, but when that session gets booked, or when you feel the call to bounce into somebody like a Lacy or I, or a mentor, or somebody that's going to change your life. It could be a child that is going to come and change your life. And I know we have so much to talk about today, but before we got on this call, I said there are elements of the rising hero's journey in the story, The Ultimate Gift. It's a movie. Is it a book too? It's a book as well.
Yeah.
So people can find that. If I remember, I'll try and put a link to it. But if I forget to do that, just search The Ultimate Gift. And in that movie, the main character is summoned to the call to adventure in his own ways, and he's got a lot of uncertainty and a lot of tasks to get through. But it's interesting, one of his first tasks that he has to accept and grow through is to find a friend.
A true friend.
A true friend. That's important. And he can't find one. All of his accounts and assets, coincidentally in this scenario, get frozen. So everybody that was his friend for money and the lifestyle he'd been living, they vacate, right? And he's left with himself, and he doesn't have a true friend. But who comes into his life in the summoning, in this call to adventure? It's not another adult or a peer. It's a child, right?
Right.
Who is the only person for a lot of this film that is actually able to be a true friend. And so we might even think that we know how the rising hero's journey could potentially play out for any one of us. But you have to be open to how it wants to show up for you, so you can deal with the unexpecteds and you can grow. And that's so much. We get so excited. I think that's what you were saying, is that like the reason why your life's work has been so exciting is not that you sat there for 20 some years and did traditional psychotherapy.
Definitely not.
It's that you met people recognizing that hero within that they couldn't even yet begin to see, but you knew it was in there.
Right.
And it shows up so differently for every single person, which means every moment in every session is part of the adventure.
Yeah.
And you never know where it's going to lead.
Yeah.
It's the best story ever written.
It is. And in fact, just the other day, I had somebody say to me, you know, Lacy, I've been in therapy for 15 years and I got more out of the 25 minutes sitting with you today than I have in 15 years of therapy.
Yes.
Right? And that's not because I'm some great coach, but it's because when you can sit with somebody in the present moment and meet them where they are in their life and know beyond a shadow of a doubt that they are their greatest hero, that there is a hero inside that is wanting to rise, and that their life is the adventure that they are wanting to rise within and move through. It is so exciting to help somebody help illuminate that for some people and help them connect to that.
Well, because a light switch was turned on in you, and that's what happens when people do finally take at least one lap around the hero's journey and go on that story arc. We become that catalyst and, the one who lights the candle of another.
Right.
And it is so exciting because we know it is inside everyone.
Yeah.
And so when you said that you're not a special coach, well, I think you are. And anyone that wakes up and goes around the track, goes around the arc a few times, it is something special because there are so many people sleeping still and sort of enduring their lives or in the status quo. Exactly. And living in this small way. And not everyone, as of yet, chooses the hero's journey.
Right.
So I think it is something fairly spectacular that's meant for everyone, but not everybody chooses it yet. And so when people bounce into you, they're probably struck by the contrast of the 15 years of therapy and the 20-minute session they just had with you, that they know they're on an entirely new path and an entirely new story arc, an entirely new field of perception than they had the 20 minutes prior.
Well, and it's striking me right now as I'm listening to you sort of reflect back to me a bit of what I said, because it really is all perspective, right? Because their life isn't necessarily any different. It's just how they choose to perceive it. It's just how they choose to move forward into it as opposed to seeing it the old way. In the old way, there were problems and there was suffering and there were, and I don't know, it was the ordinary world. But I actually want to ask the question, is the hero's journey simply a perspective?
It's interesting.
In and of itself.
A perspective shift.
Yes.
In and of itself. Are you willing to have a perspective shift? That should be the tagline here at Whole Soul School and Foundation, right? In the call to adventure, the rising hero within. Are you willing to have a perspective shift? Because that's what changes everything.
Yes.
It changes everything.
Yeah.
And some people bounce into, for example, you and I, right? They might, people we bump into in the grocery store or we've known over the years because of our kids or whatever that might be. I know there are people who bounce into my, I see them out and we don't bounce into each other again because we're living from very different perspectives. And so there's just not a lot of resonance. But those who are approximating that readiness for the journey, they bounce into you and I, whether it's a 20-minute session, whether it's an hour, whether it's weekly, monthly, annually, it doesn't matter. Those are the people that are the questers, the seekers, even when they don't know it. And the people that don't know it at all and don't have resonance with this kind of conversation, they will. Because the hero's journey is encoded inside them and they will find it when it's time.
Right.
And sometimes it's bouncing into a podcast like this to say, I didn't know I was meant for the hero's journey, and I certainly wouldn't have self-described myself that way. But when they're talking, I'm ready for change in my life. I'm ready for something different. I've been around the hamster wheel that I've been on. So there's the story arc of the hero's journey, or there's the hamster wheel. Some people can begin to recognize just in the contrast of us, I don't think I'm having what they're having.
Exactly. Right. So sometimes, the call to adventure, and we can sort of move into talking about what a call to adventure sort of can look like. But what I want to say is that sometimes there is a circumstance or an actual thing that requires us to take a step in a different direction. And sometimes it's just all of a sudden paying attention to an ordinary world that we're just not happy in anymore, that we're bored with or dissatisfied with.
If you can recognize in the moment, I would say that's an extraordinary vision you just had. If you can recognize that you're living some kind of complacency or stagnancy or staleness in some way, it could still be good. You could still have a nice paying job. You could still live on a nice little street in a house that's very comfortable. We can still have comforts in our life, but still not be living.
Right.
And that's the perspective shift that's so critical for people.
Yeah.
And to be able to recognize that is how some of the people leave their first session with you, is something about that was very different. And I either would like more of that or no, thank you.
You're right.
Is there a different sign-up sheet for next week?
Can I switch people?
Right? And you know what we know? We don't take offense to any of that.
Not at all.
Because everybody is finding exactly who they need to walk with them just a little while for the growth or lack of growth or whatever it is that they most deeply desire.
Right.
But for people who are willing and to step into the journey, and they find us and people like us or friends like us, or they expand their social circles, whatever it is,
right,
and this kind of excitement comes in, right, that's where the call to adventure, quantum accelerates in a kind of way. And it doesn't have to be an arduous journey. It can be from experience to experience. There's this amplification and this exponential growth that's happening. And so it doesn't have to be, in the films, they depict these characters having these really big trials and tribulations, right? It's life or death a lot of the time. For us, sometimes it is life or death, but sometimes it's the powerful, smaller choices that are creating either this path to a new life or cementing the old one.
Right. Yes.
And that's just as mighty.
Yes.
It's so important to know that.
Yes.
Those smaller choices create big change too.
Yes. Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about kind of the ways that it might show up.
Yes.
In everyday life.
Yeah. So first one I want to talk about is something called the journey to the return, which essentially this is a description of when the call can come as like a real whopping surprise. I know our language for that in the past has sort of been the sledgehammer. Think the tornado in The Wizard of Oz, right? When Dorothy's walking home to Auntie M's and the tornado hits and she can't.
Cataclysmic catalyst.
Right. So that's one example of a call. Something really kind of a storm. It comes quickly. It kind of blindsides you. It may come out of nowhere.
Totally unexpected.
And you have got to make some quick decisions.
Yes.
Right. To
react and respond.
Correct. And however we react and respond in that situation is going to take us in the next steps on the adventure.
Yes.
Right. It's almost like there isn't really a choice. You're going to have to do. You can't. Dorothy couldn't stay in the ordinary world of Kansas in the house without being affected by the tornado.
Right. And that's
something was going to happen.
And my language would be that's a kind of universal intervention.
Yes.
To break you up out of the spell that you're in.
Yes.
And she was broken up out of the spell that she was living in because a storm came and teleported her or transported her to this whole other world.
Right.
And she couldn't avoid it.
Right.
There was no choice to avoid it.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Another way the call could show up is like a fork in the road. So think like the missing money in the movie It's a Wonderful Life. If you remember, George's uncle loses the money at the bank and he can't find it. He's misplaced it, and Mr. Potter has actually stolen it, right? But the missing money now what do we do in this situation? Well, we've got to find the missing money. We're going to take the next steps to find the money and figure out what's going on with that.
Right.
And that took George on a huge adventure to explore what life would have been like if he had taken his own life,
the different fork, right? Exactly. It's the red pill and the blue pill too.
Right.
That's the fork. That's a big illustration.
Right. Okay, our third one we're going to call the quest, right? So the call is a request to solve or resolve a big problem, usually while undertaking a great and perilous journey. So, to me, that's like the Lord of the Rings example, when Frodo is asked to take the ring from the Shire, and he has to make a choice. That was a quest.
There's trouble on the horizon, and
Right.
he might just be the one to do it.
Exactly.
And so he sees kind of his destiny before him, and he has to kind of go through the choices in this call to adventure and this call to action. Is he going to accept?
Right.
That's a little more classic.
Right, exactly. Another one is the call could just be a frustration or a misunderstanding that has to be resolved. So with this particular call, it's a call for clarity, really, that we may not even know that we need, but it's required. So I don't know if that makes sense, but clarity of a specific situation is what's called for, right? We say that what's called for is clarity, but we may not even know that clarity is needed. But whatever the situation is that presents itself, if we step on the path, we're going to gain clarity.
Well, and the best way I know how to illustrate that is anybody that's experienced an illness that the doctors can't solve. And so there's a death to the belief and the perception that doctors know everything. Right. And the summoning is to step on to the journey and the path of exploring things that you've never even entertained before.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a frustration, or there's a lack of understanding, or there's some kind of obstacle that's preventing you from going to the next level and getting the clarity that you need. And you decide to rise beyond what's blocking those answers and enter into new territory, and therefore accept the call to adventure in this new way.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And then the last one I want to, well, maybe not the last one, but second to last, is this notion that the call is actually an actual invitation, right? So think the general invitation to the ball in Cinderella, right? So there's an invitation to the ball, and of course that leads to all of the events leading Cinderella to actually end up at the ball, and so on and so forth. So the call in our life may be an actual invitation to a friendship or a marriage or a job. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so these are some examples of ways that the call can show up in our life. And I think one of the common it's a common energetic thread almost in some ways throughout all of these examples that we've given is the notion of, I know you and I have referred to it as the squeeze, right? So we're living in our ordinary world. We're going through the motions of our life. We're not really seeing life as anything more than something to be lived in a general kind of way,
Right.
And then we start to feel the squeeze in some way. And oftentimes when we start to feel the squeeze, it's often followed by a call to adventure.
Yes.
I don't know if you would say it that way, or if that's kind of, but I can think of several things in our life. And the most pronounced for me, of course, and I know I've talked about this before, but was my retirement from my government job. I had the opportunity. I had a mandatory retirement at age 57, but I could retire at age 50 after 20 years of service. And I always thought I would retire at 57. I never thought I wouldn't. But
then the squeeze came, right? That's what you have to say. Pause and insert the squeeze, because that's how it goes.
20 years trucking along. Ooh, pause. And in comes the squeeze. And the squeeze came from all sides in a variety of different ways while in the job right at my 20-year mark. And, had you asked me 9 months prior to my 50th birthday and the 20-year kind of intersection, if I was going to retire, I would say absolutely not. I'm working till I'm 57.
Right.
But within that 9 months, multiple squeezes came into my life.
The length of time it takes to have a child, to grow a baby,
wow.
right? You grew this new version of you, which we
Yeah.
maybe haven't talked about before, but isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
And I think that squeeze is so, it really is an energetic description that resonates with me, because the squeeze is on that ordinary life. It's squeezing
Correct.
the ordinary that you are experiencing. It's kind of a universal squeezing that's kind of saying, is this all there is? Is this the only way? Is this the only path?
There's got to be something
There's
more.
got to be something more. And I don't know that all those kinds of questions necessarily come through people. Sometimes it's through suffering of like, nobody has the answer. How am I going to get it? It can come from stress, and you feel stress in this area of your life, and stress in this area of your life, and stress in this area of your life. And that's another way that the universe will put a squeeze on to say, is this your most aligned life? If you're finally feeling the squeeze,
Right.
Maybe it was once aligned, but you've changed, right?
Right.
A lot of people move for a job and it was the perfect job, or move for a partner and it was the perfect partner. Whatever it might be, there's a perspective and a perception that things were working. And then we might double down our efforts to either ignore the squeeze or push it away and work harder to make something that's showing you it's just not aligned anymore work. But if you allow the squeeze to be revelatory, if you allow it to reveal to you what it's trying to show to you. So when you got, Lacy, the first squeeze, right? Mm-hmm. Where one aspect of your job just got a little bit harder. Mm-hmm. One squeeze, we're pretty resilient and we can handle that. But then you get a second squeeze that's right next to the other squeeze. Now you've got two squeezes going on.
Well, it's actually tighter. Like, right? It's a squeeze that gets tighter and tighter and tighter.
And all of a sudden you're like, wow, maybe I don't want to stay here till I'm 57. Maybe there's something else. What's squeezing me out of what I once was truly loving to do? And
here's where the perspective shift comes in, or one of the ways. I just have to interject here.
Yes.
Because I could feel the squeeze. A person could feel the squeeze and give their focus to the constriction, the tension, feel the suffering, and feel I have to live with this, and I'm going to have to live with this for the rest of my life. Or somebody could feel the squeeze and say, I've got to look forward. There must be a different way. There must be an alternative solution.
This is an important cue that I'm getting from myself and from the universe that's trying to partner with me to give me a new experience, to call me into a new direction in some way that might be more fulfilling. And a lot of people will judge through their old lenses a failure of like, I used to be good at this job, or I used to be good in this relationship. What is it that's not right in me? We kind of self-criticize, or we put on those critical lenses. It's okay to have your eyes open and be looking, but oftentimes the ego will go first to criticism, right? And judgment.
Right.
But if you could put on another set of lenses and say, well, I'm being shown something, and keep the don't know mind and say, I've heard something about this hero's journey. Here, this is happening it's happening to me now.
Or I'm getting a call. Do I answer it?
I'm getting a call. Do I answer it? Exactly. And you can just be open to what it's trying to show you. And that means if you're open to what it's trying to show you, it means you may just shift your perception. And you may just expand your vision to see a much bigger picture. And I don't think we finished that when the squeeze comes in the hero's journey, that's our language. That was our experience, that if we were getting squeezed, what's the message? What's the lesson?
Right.
What's the learning? That the squeezing, if you don't see it in its negative form, which is you failed in some way, something's not working out, you're going to have to tolerate and suffer for the rest of your life, these grandiose,
I'm a victim
negative
of life,
thoughts, right? The other alternative, right, that's always there for us is that it's opening us up to a bigger picture.
Yes.
And if it's opening us to a bigger picture, it's opening us to a bigger world. And the universe knows that its design is to lead us into that bigger life, is to lead us into that more authentic experience and expression of ourselves. And when the universe has allowed us to toil away in our little small goldfish bowl, and that's the only world we have, right? And the time's up. right? Time's up for that little life.
Right.
It will keep coming and knocking, and often through what we experienced and have called the squeezes, but we can call it these other things: the quests, the call, the invitation, the storm that funnels through. There's all different ways, and if you're open to seeing the cues, you're also open to receiving its gifts. The call to adventure does not necessarily mean that you're going to crash and burn in a storm. It may be. Sometimes the storms are very intense. And if they are, the intensity matches in proportions to the growth that's possible for you. So if you have a really big storm, that can also mean that there's really big gifts. Exponential gifts and growth.
Right.
And if you have smaller versions of storms going on right now, you always have the opportunity to really expand and exponentially grow. But sometimes the growth we do and the journey we take is in proportion to the invitation we received.
Yeah.
And if you can look at invitations to the calls to adventure as an adventure itself, right? As becoming active as a participant and a creator in your life's journey, that's where the magic begins to happen. That's when Cinderella calls in the fairy godmother because she wants to go to the ball. She received the invitation. She doesn't know how she's going to get there, but she sees herself there. And as the story goes, the fairy godmother is summoned in. And who summons it in but Cinderella's higher self, her hero inside.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And then she has the squeeze, though. She's allowed to go. She's got this beautiful carriage. All this magic happened. The mice became the footmen, whatever they all became.
Right.
But there's still a squeeze.
Right.
You have until midnight.
Yes.
Now there's a time deadline, right?
Yeah.
There's something squeezing the process of her own growth. So go enjoy this. You summoned in this gift, but you have to do it in this amount of time.
Right.
That's the way another squeeze in the journey. So it just needs to become part of humanity's language that this is actually a very normal part of the life process that has been deleted out of our conscious awareness. And when we write it back in, we say, oh, this is perfectly natural. I'm going to have this great experience. And there's also the squeeze that's showing me I have to demonstrate to myself some new level of skill, some new awareness, some new something, and test of faith, something. And if you step into that, and as we know, Cinderella, even though she goes through several more tests, she ends up with the prince, right?
Yeah, and I think as we kind of round this out, I sort of feel compelled to reiterate for our listeners that this really is about our perspective on life, because life is unfolding in every minute of every day. It is an adventure. We have forks in the road constantly throughout the days, throughout the hours, the days, the weeks, the months, the years. Our life is a series of forks in the road. But if we're living in a place of fear and we're living in a place of not wanting to move out of our comfort zone, then that life is not going to be much of a positive adventure. We're going to live in a state of suffering, a state of sort of victimhood
and smallness,
of life.
and a smaller life.
Right.
And small isn't bad if it's really fulfilling.
Right.
Some people also have lifetimes that are incredibly meaningful and with, smaller calls to adventure, but it's still pretty fabulous because every moment is a choice point to choose being fulfilled and to choose living fully. But we're speaking to the larger expression of kind of being asleep in your own life and not knowing that you're a creator and not being creative in your life and kind of being trapped in the experience, but not knowing there's anything else.
Exactly.
And that's what we're really trying to highlight today.
So even if there is there could be a diagnosis that comes into your life, or there could be the loss of a loved one that comes into your life, or there could be a job opportunity or a transfer that you don't really want. You're not asking for, or a job ending, a layoff. Exactly. I mean, these are big things in our life that if we look at them through the lens of loss and tragedy and grief and suffering, then we will continue to live in sort of that negative space, and we will not reap the benefits of the learning that could come from if we viewed these things as as an adventure and trust that whatever this is for me, it's meant to be. It's meant for me to step into, it's meant for me to learn from, and it's meant for me to help guide and teach others.
Yes.
And that's just amazing.
Well, and the takeaways from the hero's journey, I mean, there's so many, and they may be different ones each time, but these qualities of like trust and faith and resilience. Resilience is a really big one that the hero learns inside themselves. That, of course, there's the old adage, that which doesn't break us makes us stronger. But I think we end up with a kind of resilience and a kind of fortitude that by facing the waves of the storms in the journey and coming out the other side, however we come out the other side, there's these qualities to us that can never be taken away, and we don't lose them. We only grow them from that point forward. So one resilience creates and expands another resilience, which makes us ever stronger. And that's why people who are in this journey and learn these skills and come out the other side of the story arc again and again, they kind of have a glow to them, because they know that there's something about them that's different. They're being built up with like kind of I would say a divine strength or some otherworldly quality that people who are trapped otherwise in the matrix, if we use the matrix's language, like they took the blue pill and they don't know how to get out, but they don't remember they were offered the red pill, because that's part of the blue pill. Is that you don't know that you can get out.
Right.
But you know what? If you miss a turn and you take the blue pill, I would say in our podcast, I believe that the red pill will always come again, right? If you're willing to seek it and you're willing to know that this is the path for all of us as we evolve as human beings in our individual lives and as a collective humanity, right? We are evolving in these times, and seeing these opportunities to grow faith, to grow resilience, to grow trust, and to grow these qualities, that's exciting, even if the experience of what you have to go through to grow them isn't a whole lot of fun. And so we can think of all these characters. I don't know that Luke Skywalker would say it was fabulous to battle with Darth Vader, right? Everybody knows how you feel when you see Darth Vader on the screen, right? It doesn't feel like a warm and fuzzy feeling. But he grows through that. He steps up to the challenges, and he gains a resilience and a strength that is beyond language. That's what happens. We just get to a place where it's so magnificent, it's even hard to squeeze it into little words anymore. So, Lacy, I want to thank you for joining me, because this is so our passion, it's so what we love. And we're just, it's the tip of the iceberg with all these conversations, because the hero's journey has so many aspects, and there's so many pathways, and there's so many emotions and everything inside it, that we could be talking about this for years.
That's right.
But I thank you for joining me at least today. And I want to thank...
Well, and this was the call to adventure. Yes. So I suspect that next month we will focus on the next phase.
Yes, and talk about continued. It further to be continued. Yeah. Exactly. So I want to thank our listeners for hanging around with us and for answering the call to adventure, to talk about the call to adventure in this podcast. And I want to invite people to visit our website at wholesoulschoolandfoundation.org. We're in the process of an upgrade, so you're not seeing that in the outer world yet, but there's a lot of elf work on the back end to create those upgrades. And so we're excited about that, and we're just planting those seeds with you. Visit there. You can sign up there to receive our newsletter and our notifications, and we're going to have many more offerings to come. So if you haven't subscribed directly on our website, please accept that invitation, right, to come and do that. I want to invite you once more to visit our apparel in our Bonfire store, and I'll leave the link to that below. And again, on our new website, you'll just be able to, surf and search and shop on our website directly. But we have some fun merchandise. We're going to be creating more designs and more fun, wearable, hero's journey type energy to fortify you in the journey, that you can have some fun things to wear or to give as gifts to other people. So we're excited about that. And when you purchase these kinds of items, you're also supporting our mission, which is to bring more of these podcasts, have more messengers, more voices talking about all the different aspects of the hero's journey. And I just want to say I thank everybody for their support. I thank people who are one-time donors. I thank also very much so our sustainer donors, people who give every month. It is such a gift.
Such a gift.
To us and to the people listening who benefit from your generous gifts. And I want to just say you can find us also on YouTube and on social media, and also on some alternative media on Rumble and Gab and Minds. You can find us on Spotify, iTunes, and lots of places where you can just plug in with your earbuds if listening to just the audio alone, it works better for you. So when you're traveling, you can listen to us in a variety of ways. And so we're nearly at the end of May, eking out this podcast for the month of May. We'll be back again in June talking about new topics, including more of this hero's journey and the stages of what we all are growing through. And also we hope to have some more different voices starting to have more podcasts and sharing different things. So tune in on your favorite social media platforms, and definitely tune into our website where all the action is always posted there. So, and until next time, we send you blessings. Have a great day.